It was the evening of April 7th, 2025, and though he was no longer president, his name still echoed across the airwaves, from conservative talk shows to liberal late-night programs. Tonight, he was headed to Jimmy Kimmel's show, a place where he was definitely not expected with open arms. "You sure this is a good idea, boss?" asked his assistant Eric, adjusting his tie in the rearview mirror. "Kimmel's been mocking you every night for the past 5 years. This is like walking into a lion's cage." Trump smiled his signature smile, a little smug, a little defiant. "Eric, I know Jimmy. He thinks I'm coming to pick a fight. But I'll surprise him. I'll surprise everyone. It's going to be fantastic, believe me." Eric sighed, but said nothing. He knew arguing with Trump was pointless. The idea was simple. Trump would appear on the show, crack some jokes, show he could laugh at himself, and maybe even win over part of Kimmel's audience. It was a risk, but Trump loved taking risks. The ABC studio buzzed with tension as the SUV pulled up to the back entrance. A security guard in a dark suit led them through a maze of hallways smelling of coffee makeup and a faint trace of someone's sneaky cigarette. Behind the scenes, Kimmel's team bustled around, checking scripts and monitors. Jimmy stood by his dressing room, holding a mug that read "World's Best Host" and talking to his producer. "You're kidding me. He actually showed up." Kimmel's voice was a mix of surprise and sarcasm. "I thought it was some kind of prank." "No, he's here. And he wants to go on stage," said the producer, a wiry man named Tim with a nervous tremor in his voice. "We can cancel if you're not ready." Kimmel laughed, but a shadow of worry flickered in his eyes. "Cancel? And miss the chance to roast him live? No way. But if he thinks I'm going easy on him, he's in for a shock." Trump walked into the dressing room 5 minutes before showtime. He wore his usual dark blue suit with a red tie that hung just a bit too long. His hair was neatly combed as always, and his skin had that trademark bronze tint. He shook Kimmel's hand, a firm grip, almost too firm, as if both men were trying to prove something. "Jimmy, you look great. Thin as always. What, back on that keto diet?" Trump joked, settling into a chair. Kimmel forced a smile. "And you, Donald, still look like you just stepped off a golden throne. How's Florida treating you?" "Fantastic, Jimmy. Sunshine, golf, the best people. But I missed the cameras, you know. Thought I'd drop by, stir up your liberal crowd a bit." Kimmel raised an eyebrow. "Well, they'll be thrilled, I'm sure. Just don't expect me to play nice." "I wouldn't want you to," Trump shot back, his eyes narrowing. "Let's make it fun." The show began at 11:35 p.m. Pacific Time. The studio was packed. Tickets had sold out within hours after news broke of the guest. The stage lights beamed, the air hummed from the air conditioners, and the scent of popcorn from the audience mixed with the faint aroma of floor polish. Kimmel came out to thunderous applause, his smile wide but slightly tense. "Good evening, America. Tonight, we've got a very special guest. You won't believe who agreed to come on my show. Please welcome Donald Trump." The crowd erupted, half cheering, half booing. Trump strode onto the stage confidently, waved like he was at a rally, and sat in the chair across from Kimmel. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every move. "Donald, welcome to the show," Kimmel began, holding cue cards. "I've got to say, I was surprised to hear you wanted to come. You know I haven't exactly been your biggest fan." Trump laughed, loudly, theatrically. "Jimmy, I know you love making fun of me. That's fine. All the best comedians do it. But I'm here to show I can take a joke as well as anyone." The audience laughed, but the tension was still there. Kimmel leaned forward. "All right, let's start simple. Do you still believe the 2020 election was stolen?" The question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. The audience held its breath. Trump could have exploded, lashed out like he'd done hundreds of times on Fox News or Twitter. But he didn't. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and smiled. "Jimmy, I knew you'd ask that. Everyone expects me to yell about fraud, mail-in ballots, all that. But you know what? That's not why I'm here. I'm here to talk to you. And to them," he nodded toward the audience. Maybe we don't agree, but does that mean we can't laugh together? Kimmel blinked, clearly thrown off. So, you didn't answer. Is that a yes or a no? It's a let's talk about something more interesting. Trump waved it off. Like why your ratings dropped when you stopped making fun of Biden. The room burst into laughter, and Kimmel had to roll with it, though his eyes flashed with irritation. Oh, you want to play comedian? All right, Donald. Tell us a joke. Trump rubbed his hands together. Why will Jimmy Kimmel never be president? Because he can't go a day without his writers. The audience laughed, even those who had booed earlier. Kimmel rolled his eyes, but smiled. Not bad, but I say you can't go a day without a mirror. The game was going well, jokes, jabs, light tension. But backstage, producers were already whispering. Something about Trump's demeanor was off. He was too calm, too deliberate. Kimmel felt it too. He decided to raise the stakes. All right, Donald, let's get serious. You came here to my audience, people who, let's just say, didn't always vote for you. Why? What are you trying to prove? Trump fell silent for a moment. The camera zoomed in on his face, wrinkles around the eyes, a faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. He looked at Kimmel, then at the audience. I want to prove that we can talk. Not shout, not insult each other, but talk. You think I'm some kind of monster because you listen to him, he nodded at Kimmel, and CNN. I think you're wrong about a lot of things. But can't we just sit down and figure it out? The room quieted. Kimmel leaned forward, his voice sharper. You're serious? After everything you've said about us, about liberals, about Hollywood, about the elites? You want us to believe you've suddenly become a peacemaker? Trump shrugged. I'm not saying I've changed. I'm saying I'm willing to listen. Are you? That was the moment it could have all gone sideways. Kimmel could have hit back with a joke, torn Trump apart like he'd done countless times before. But something in Trump's tone, calm, almost sincere, stopped him. He looked at the audience, then back at his guest. All right, Kimmel said slowly. Let's try. What do you want to say to my audience? And then something happened that no one expected. Trump leaned back in his chair, his hands resting calmly on the armrests. The hall waited, holding its breath. Jimmy Kimmel, still holding the question cards, leaned forward, his eyebrows slightly raised in anticipation. The stage lighting cast sharp shadows on the floor, and the hum of the air conditioners seemed louder in the silence. The smell of popcorn from the audience mingled with the faint aroma of coffee wafting from backstage. All right, Jimmy, Trump began, his voice low but clear. I'm going to say something that might shock your audience. I'm not perfect. Yeah, I know you're thinking, oh, we've heard this before. But I mean it. I've made mistakes. A lot of mistakes. And I'm not here to justify them or convince you I was right. I'm here to ask, what do you think? Kimmel blinked, clearly not prepared for this turn. He was used to Trump the fighter, Trump who attacks, not this calm man who seemed to be inviting conversation. The crowd murmured, some whispered, others chuckled quietly, thinking it was just another act. You're asking my audience what they think, Kimmel repeated, his tone teetering between sarcasm and curiosity. Are you sure you want to hear that? Because I can turn on the mic in the audience, and we'll find out right now. Trump nodded, his eyes gleaming, not arrogantly, but with a strange confidence. Turn it on. Let's see what they have to say. I'm ready. Kimmel motioned to an assistant, and within a second, a mic appeared in the audience, passed from hand to hand. The first to speak was a woman in her 60s with short gray hair and thick-framed glasses. Her voice trembled, but it was firm. I'm Ann from Pasadena, she said, standing up. I've voted against you, Mr. Trump. Twice. And I don't believe you've suddenly become so peace-loving. For years, you divided us into us and them. Why should I believe you now? The audience erupted in applause, though a few voices shouted out in Trump's defense. Kimmel smiled, clearly pleased with the question. But Trump didn't flinch. He looked at Ann, his face calm. Ann, thank you for saying that, he replied. I understand why you feel that way. I was tough. Sometimes too tough. But you know what? I watched this country fall apart, not because of me, but because we stopped listening to each other. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm asking you to give a chance to talk. Not yell, not insult, just talk. And sat down, her face still showing doubt, but the hall grew quiet. Next, a man in a denim jacket with a thick beard spoke up. He looked to be in his 70s. I'm Tom from San Diego, he boomed. I supported you, Mr. Trump. But I don't like that you're here, in this liberal snake pit. He nodded toward Kimmel. Why aren't you on Fox, where they respect you? Kimmel laughed, but Trump raised a hand to stop him. Tom, I appreciate your support. I really do. But if I only talk to people who already respect me, what's going to change? I'm here because I want to understand why and people like her think differently. And maybe so they can understand me, too. Kimmel shook his head, but a flicker of curiosity passed through his eyes. You sound like some kind of therapist, Donald. What happened? Where's the guy who used to call me a loser on Twitter? Trump smiled, genuinely this time. He's still here, Jimmy. But I'm tired of yelling. Aren't you? The crowd stirred again, and Kimmel felt himself losing control of the situation. He decided to steer the show back to familiar ground. Okay, let's get back to the jokes. Got another one for us? Trump nodded. Of course. Why will Jimmy Kimmel never win an Oscar for Best Screenplay? Because he wastes all his talent insulting me. The hall exploded in laughter, and even Kimmel couldn't help but smile. But backstage, the producers started whispering more urgently. Tim, the head producer, approached the director and quietly said, Something's off. He's too calm. This isn't the Trump we were expecting. And that's when the unexpected shift happened. As the laughter faded, a man stood up in the back row. He was thin, in an old gray sweater, his eyes darting nervously. In his hands, he held a crumpled, yellowed piece of paper. His voice shook as he spoke without a mic, but in the silence, everyone heard him. Mr. Trump, is it true you're here to announce a comeback? Because I heard. I heard you're planning something big. Something that will shock us all. The room froze. Kimmel leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. What? What's he talking about, Donald? Trump looked at the man, then at Kimmel. His smile faded, but he didn't seem annoyed. He looked thoughtful. I don't know where you heard that, he said slowly. But since you asked, yes, I'm planning something. But not what you think. Kimmel jumped to his feet. Wait. You can't just drop a bomb like that and not explain. What are you planning? A 2028 run? A new reality show? What? Trump stood as well, his presence suddenly larger, more commanding. He turned to the audience, and his voice took on a new tone, not anger, not arrogance, but something deeper. I'm planning to bring people together. Not Republicans, not Democrats, everyone. I'm tired of this war. And I know many of you are, too. I want to do something no one expects from me. Not an election, not a campaign. Something real. The hall erupted, some clapped, some shouted, some laughed, thinking it was a joke. Kimmel stood frozen, his mouth open, his cue cards scattered on the floor. Cameras whirred, capturing every move. And backstage, Tim clutched his head. This is either a disaster or genius, he muttered. Trump sat back down, his face once again calm. Jimmy, you asked what I want to prove. Here's your answer. I want to prove we can be better. And I'm starting right here, on your show. Kimmel slowly sat, his eyes still wide open. I don't know what to say. This is the strangest night of my life. The audience laughed, but the tension didn't fade. Everyone felt that something more than just a television segment had happened. And everyone, from and in Pasadena to Tom in San Diego, wanted to know what would happen next. But the show wasn't over yet. The Jimmy Kimmel Show was nearing its end, but the atmosphere in the studio was far from over. The crowd buzzed like a living organism, a mixture of surprise, skepticism, and cautious intrigue. The stage lighting softened as the cameras pulled back, offering a wider shot. Trump sat in his chair, his hands calmly resting on his knees, while Kimmel nervously tapped his fingers on the desk. Backstage, the smell of coffee mixed with a faint hint of sweat. The show's crew felt like they were losing control, but couldn't look away from what was unfolding. Kimmel looked at Trump, his eyes still glinting with a mix of disbelief and curiosity. "All right, Donald, you just dropped something completely insane on this table. Gather the people? Something real? You seriously think my audience, or I, will believe you suddenly turned into a peace ambassador?" Trump sighed, not theatrically, but quietly, almost wearily. He looked at Kimmel, then at the audience, and his voice dropped, becoming more resonant, more sincere. "Jimmy, I know what you're thinking. That this is just another stunt. That I'm here to sell something, a book, a show, a campaign. And I don't blame you. I built that image myself, loud, aggressive, always on the attack. But you know what? I sit at home in Florida, watch the news, and I see the same thing you all do. Yelling insults, hatred. And I'm tired of being part of it. I want to try something different." Kimmel crossed his arms, his eyebrows raised. "And what is this something different?" "Because if you tell me you're opening a meditation center in Mar-a-Lago, I'm officially losing my mind." The audience laughed, and even Trump smiled briefly but genuinely. "No, not meditation. Although, maybe that's not the worst idea. No, Jimmy, I want to create a forum. Right here in Los Angeles. I'll invite people, not politicians, not TV pundits, just regular people. Like and from Pasadena or Tom from San Diego. And we'll talk about everything, taxes, healthcare, borders, whatever. No yelling, no scripts. Just conversation." Silence hung in the air for a second, then the room erupted in noise. Some clapped, some whistled, others shouted, "That's impossible." Kimmel raised his hand, trying to regain control. Hold on. You want to organize. What? A people's summit? You, Donald Trump, who called half the country socialists and losers, want to sit at the table with them?" "Yes," Trump replied plainly. "And I want you there, Jimmy. You can mock me the whole time if you want. But I think you'll be surprised at what people have to say when they're given a chance." Kimmel leaned back, his face a mix of shock and disbelief. He glanced at the audience, then at producer Tim, who stood backstage waving his arms like he was begging to wrap the segment. But Kimmel didn't stop. "All right, let's say I believe you," he said slowly. "How do you imagine this? Because all I see is chaos. People hate each other, Donald. You know that better than anyone." Trump nodded. "I know. And I'm not saying it'll be easy. But I'm willing to start. And I'll start right now." He turned to the audience. "Who wants to talk to me? Right here, right now?" The room fell still, then a hand slowly rose, and from Pasadena. She stood up, her glasses catching the spotlight. "I'll talk. But I want to know why you think you can change. Because I've seen how you've behaved for years, and it's hard to believe." Trump looked at her, and for the first time that evening, his eyes softened. "And I'm not promising to become the person you want me to be. But I promise to listen. Tell me what's bothering you. Right now." She sighed, her voice trembling. "I'm worried that my grandkids are growing up in a world where no one listens to each other. Where everything's a fight. And I'm afraid that people like you only make it worse." Trump nodded without interrupting. "I understand. And I can't change the past. But I can try to make sure your grandkids see something different." "What else?" And hesitated, then continued. "Healthcare. My daughter can't afford insurance, and I can't help her. And I've heard you say Obamacare is a disaster. But what do you offer instead?" Kimmel raised an eyebrow, expecting Trump to go on the attack. But he didn't. "Fair question," he said. "I still think the system is broken. But I don't have a perfect answer right now. I want to hear what people like you think. Because maybe I was wrong to assume it was that simple." The audience gasped. Kimmel literally leaned back in his chair, his mouth slightly open. "Did you just say you might be wrong? I want that recorded. That's a historic moment. Trump laughed, loud, but without malice. Write it down, Jimmy. I'm not afraid to look human. Tom from San Diego stood up next. I want to know if you'll listen to us conservatives or just liberals to look good. I'll listen to everyone, Tom, Trump replied. Because I know you guys feel left out too. Let's talk about it. The conversation continued for a few more minutes, and Tom and a few others asked questions, and Trump responded. Not always perfectly, not always agreeing, but without shouting, without insults. Kimmel sat observing, and his sarcastic mask slowly melted. He even asked a question himself about taxes, and Trump answered without his usual aggression. As the show neared its end, Kimmel looked at the clock and stood up. All right, Donald, I don't know what just happened here. But I'll admit you surprised me. And maybe I'll think about your forum. But if you're joking, I'm tearing you apart in the next monologue. Trump stood and shook his hand, this time without the excessive grip, just human to human. Jimmy, I'm counting on it. But I'm serious. Thanks for giving me a chance. The cameras shut off, and the room exploded in applause, not unanimous, but sincere. People whispered, debated, laughed. And from Pasadena returned to her seat, her face still doubtful, but with a glimmer of hope. Tom from San Diego shook his head, but smiled. Backstage, Tim held his head in his hands. This was either the biggest flop or the best episode ever, he muttered. Kimmel stood by the desk, watching Trump walk toward the dressing room. He turned to the audience and quietly said, Well, America, I think we just saw something new. And I have no idea what to do with it. The show ended, but the story didn't. The next day, headlines buzzed. Trump shocks on Kimmel. Can he really change? Donald Trump's peace forum? Social media exploded. Some called it a genius move, others a cynical stunt. But in small towns like Pasadena and San Diego, people started quietly talking to each other. Not yelling, talking. And in Mar-a-Lago, Trump sat on the terrace looking at the ocean. The wind rustled the palms, the air salty and warm. He held his phone, listening to a voice message from Kimmel. Donald, if you're serious, I'm in. But I still think you're crazy. Trump smiled. This was only the beginning.